Hello everyone and welcome to another Green Supply Chain Talks. I'm excited to introduce Giulia Borsa. She's a real powerhouse in sustainability with experience across the private sector, nonprofit and academia. She right now is leading the EMEA sector the EMEA market for Gravity, which is a software platform that handles carbon accounting and energy management. We're going to chat about how ESG is becoming a real big deal for a company's bottom line, and what are the challenges and the ups and downs that comes with it. Basically, our main aim will be to demystify financial materiality in the context of ESG. But before we do that, Giulia, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Thanks so much for the invite. I'm very excited to be here. My background is quite diverse, I'd say. I'm a lawyer by training, specialized in international human rights law. But yeah, before joining Gravity, where I lead the GTM strategy for EMEA, I was part of EcoVadis for 6 years as well in the sustainability space, helping companies being more sustainable in supply chains. And before that, I also work in the NGO and public space as well, more interested in the intersection between human rights and the private sector.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Really kind of broad background, and I'm sure you've had the opportunity to kind of see things through very different lenses, right? So hopefully we'll learn a little bit about that today. Let's start a little bit broad to set the scene. Can you tell us a little bit about basically how is ESG criteria becoming financially material for companies, and particularly if you could in the context of supply chains?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're seeing now a tipping moment in the history of sustainability reporting for sure. So I'd say the first one is for sure sustainability compliance. So what we're seeing is that we're moving and shifting towards a more voluntary reporting to a mandatory reporting, and therefore there are financial fees or penalties linked to those that are not compliant. The second one is capital markets. It is more expensive for companies performing lower in terms of ESG to borrow money. Whereas obviously for those performing better, we will see that later on, but there are sustainable linked loans, there are other financial benefits or better interest rates for companies that are performing better in sustainability. One other key point is as well the risks that a company faces. And we're seeing that with climate and extreme weather events that are causing major disruptions. On average, we're seeing that $24 million are actually invested in recovering from a climate extreme weather event in companies. And at the same time, what we're seeing is a change in the consumer behavior and response and demand. We're seeing clients boycotting companies, perhaps lack of human rights compliance or mistreatment of employees. And what we are also seeing is consumers being willing to pay more for a product that is more sustainable and perhaps even a bit more expensive. And the last point I'd say as well is the market access. We are seeing that as well with Finboot, right? That specialize a lot on deforestation. But you may not even be able to enter to center markets like Europe if your product is not meeting a certain standard in sustainability. We're seeing that with deforestation again. But it is becoming key that for you to be in certain markets, you have to absolutely be more sustainable or meet, obviously, the minimum standards.
No, absolutely. And I think, again, you've mentioned quite a lot of ranges of why basically non-financial reporting is getting to be more and more relevant. And I think we often focus, right? So you mentioned the regulatory angle, right? Going from voluntary to mandatory. which is maybe where we often focus, and perhaps focus more than we should, because then you have the element of capital markets, which, as you say, we're going to deep dive today. You have the conscious consumers as well. You have risk management. I think one of the shifts that we're seeing more recently, and perhaps that's partly linked to some of the geopolitical context on sustainability, is moving from sustainability into, well, actually, this is risk management and risk mitigation. And you mentioned, was it 25 million, right? That it costs you to then recover from certain extreme weather events, and they are becoming more and more the norm, right? So ultimately, it's about being prepared for that, and of course, some of the role that we do at Finboot, which is guaranteeing market access, basically access to the European market, which I think most global companies want to have, is getting more and more restrictive, and you got to make sure that you comply, right? So all of these different angles play a role into basically why sustainability reporting and non-financial reporting in general is becoming critical, right, for organizations. Now, if we focus a little bit on that kind of capital markets, access to capital in general, and let's drive the conversation there for today. You, within your answer, you mentioned a little bit about sustainable linked loans. So can you tell us, in layman's terms, if possible, like what are sustainable link loans, and what are maybe some examples of those that you've seen successfully be implemented?
100%. So in the context of sustainable finance and green finance, there are a couple of terms or examples that are very interesting. And one is sustainable linked loans, as you were mentioning. This is basically when a company is meeting certain standards, is probably rated under one of these, multiple rating agencies in sustainability. They may be eligible for a better interest rate, better conditions when asking for a loan, and it's actually called sustainable linked loans because those are, focused and given in particular in the context of sustainability. This is one example, and the other one, for instance, is the supply chain finance. So basically, a client may work alongside with its supplier through a financial institution that may be able to pay in advance to this supplier because it's performing better in terms of sustainability, or give, again, a better interest rate or better financial advantages to this supplier that the client may not even be able to do. But thanks to this, let's say, triangular relationship in which the client with its bank is able to actually give this advantage to the supplier, we are incentivizing also suppliers to perform better in terms of ESG, for sure.
No, excellent. Because I think supply chain finance in particular is something that we've seen particularly in the retail supply chain for years now, but not necessarily linked to sustainability. So it's good to see that it's now taking that approach of, well, actually, the financial institutions are going to offer you a better approach if you focus more on sustainability and if you meet certain targets, right? And from the SLL standpoint, again, it becomes a lot more important because if you're an organization, and I think no matter how large, right? I've seen examples of this from energy giants that are accessing SLLs. It's okay, I have a huge project around carbon capture, decarbonization, and then your rate, basically your interest rate on those loans is going to shift depending on what are the objectives that you fulfill from a sustainability standpoint. So ultimately, again, reporting, data capture, and transparent record keeping, it's a core need for these instruments to work, right?
Absolutely.
Now, in the context, perhaps of decarbonization efforts, right? As I was talking a little bit about some decarbonization initiatives, things like energy savings or emissions reductions in how are these kind of savings, these cost savings, contributing to a long-term value creation, right? So is it just, I'm saving a little bit of money now, or do I actually get a big return in the long term that could be linked to some of the sustainability actions or energy savvy decisions that I may be making now? And perhaps tell us a little bit how some of this work maybe fits into what you guys do at Gravity.
Absolutely. It's a great question because is a clear example that sustainability, it is for sure an investment, but at the end of the day, it can also be it can also drive cost savings for sure. What we do at Gravity in that particular point of decarbonization and energy management, we have a team that actually helps company. It's composed by energy engineers that would actually audit the facilities, the sites, and the certain machinery use on a manufacturing production facility, for instance, and then understand what are the hotspots and the areas of improvement when it comes to energy savings. I've got a couple of examples. One is Race Winning, which is an automotive company. We perform an assessment and identify that actually by using just LED and by actually changing as well the waste heat recovery and demand response, they could actually save tens of thousands of dollars per year, which is not even a huge shift of the entire facilities. It's actually small changes that can actually drive impact in the short term and have a payback period of maybe 1 or 2 years, and then have a quite substantial impact. And then another example, also optimizing the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system just towards a more optimal and efficient solution that has saved in one of our clients $2 million per dollars, $2 million per year, which is also very, very substantial. So I think at the end of the day, decarbonization for sure. At the beginning, we're going to have to invest in, solar panels or a certain type of boiler and so on. But at the end of the day, in a payback period of whatever, from 1 to maybe 10 years, we're going to be able not just to obviously recover that investment, but actually make sure that we're going to save money from energy.
Yeah, I think that's critical, right? Because this is also not, as you say, you're citing real world examples. It's not that maybe you get a 2 to 3 year return. No, it's like it's tested, it's validated. There's enough evidence going around of companies that have successfully done this. Mm-hmm. So it's changing that narrative. Well, actually, sustainability investment is not let's do this because it's good for the planet or for the morality of it, which should also be part of the argument, of course. But it's actually because it's good for business. It creates return. It's going to create a long-term value, and it's not a kind of wild bet, right? It's not like, oh, let's see how this works out or how this if it actually yields a return, right? So I think it's good to see how that narrative is changing through evidence. And potentially this is something that you could also link to an SLL, right? Because you could have a big change to your manufacturing side, as you say, kind of retrofitting some of your equipment or replacing some of your equipment that is going to lead to a long-term return. But also you could finance that in the short term with something like an SLL, right? So that mixing and having a kind of comprehensive strategy around sustainability and finance put together could be really interesting, right? So getting more kind of into our conversation, right? I want to ask a question. In your view, what are then some of the main challenges, right? So when a company is trying to kind of integrate ESG and ESG reporting into their organizations, what's stopping them, right? Because there's certainly an appetite financially to do so, right? And we've talked about that. But then what is it that is kind of holding them back and saying, well, actually, no, this is too difficult and I'd rather just keep things as they are, even though they're basically leaving money on the table by doing so. So what are some of those kind of key challenges, and what would you recommend could be ways to overcome them?
For sure. Look, I always think that there are internal and external challenges. Most of the time, and in my experience, what I've seen internal challenges being is when you're implementing or you are trusting a solution to, manage your reporting, your carbon accounting, your supplier assessment, sometimes it's tricky to break the burden of the internal team who's been maybe working on it as business as usual without not necessarily, having to also monitor ESG performance, KPIs, or even asking their suppliers more information than the regular quality and health and safety and on-time delivery and price, right? So basically, I'd say here capacity building is key, right?
Yeah.
And making very clear to your employees why this is so strategic for your business, why this is an opportunity for the business growth. One very particular thing that you can implement is incentive for your employees at first. So incentivizing your employees by the KPIs measure by the suppliers they have rated. For instance, if I think of a procurement department and the buyers who are normally in charge of, managing the relationship with the suppliers, also asking these suppliers to meet certain criteria and kind of, have a clear target of we need to have rated this amount of suppliers and incentivizing the people who are achieving these results. This is a great way to start. Obviously, in the long term, many companies shift from this kind of, nice to have, I'd say, incentive to a more mandatory linked directly to the MBOs of these buyers incentives, which at the end of the day will for sure ensure that we meet the objectives. The second challenge, I'd say, is the externals or perhaps the ones that we cannot control necessarily as much, like suppliers, right? Especially in the context of carbon accounting or supplier assessment or, as well, deforestation. When I need my supplier to answer and give me particular visibility on his processes, we'll probably see the barrier of the supplier willing to respond to certain questionnaires and understanding that this is just another layer of work for them. So here it's key, in my experience, to work alongside the supplier, organize workshops, supplier days, for instance, make them realize that this is not just important for your relationship buyer-supplier, but this is key as well for the supplier growth. There are clear ROIs that you can build with your suppliers that will allow the supplier to access to better market opportunities, to position better than the competitors in terms of sustainability, to work on a longer relationships thanks to the visibility and transparency that you are giving or they are giving to you. And for sure, what we were saying before, even, sustainable link loans and other financial benefits that they may access to. So I'd say these are a couple of examples.
No, very, very interesting. And I see exactly you have, basically, broadly put, you have two challenges. One is get your house in order, right? Because you need to focus on change management. You need to focus on capacity building, as you said, and you need to make sure that internally you're creating the conditions for this to happen, right? And I think a quote that comes to mind there, and I've seen it often, is the whole culture eats a strategy for breakfast, right? So you see all of these organizations with their huge ESG and sustainability strategies and all of this message going out. And then when you look inwards, you're like, well, actually, you have a lot of barriers and a lot of middle management in your organization that you haven't focused on basically enabling them to do this work. And I've had conversations with some industry stakeholders that are like, yeah, I mean, that's what we're saying, but I don't know. And I think that mindset has to change. Fortunately, I've also seen the contrary, right? I've seen organizations where the whole strategy conversation is top to bottom, right? Yeah. Everyone is aligned in that change, and that's critical. And then it's not only your house, as you mentioned as well, you also need to look out for your suppliers, right? Where I think there's a challenge of them not necessarily seeing the full value. So you gave some really interesting ideas and tips, like, again, supplier days and engaging with them and showing them that again, like what we've been discussing throughout our conversation, sustainability is about business opportunity. It's not a burden, or it's not alone a burden. Of course, there's some changes and some work that needs to be put into it, but there's a return behind that, right?
Right.
So Giulia, I think we're coming down to the end of our interview, but I need to ask this final question, of course, because it's a little bit the role of digitalization, right? Which of course to us is key. Particularly in the context of traceability, ESG, data traceability, right? How can we help companies basically strengthen those supply chains so that they can unlock some of the financial value that we've discussed today? What are your thoughts in that?
Absolutely. Well, I think digitalization has brought a major opportunities for business to really focus on the strategy of sustainability. Solutions like Finboot, for instance, are helping a lot on supply chain transparency and monitoring and tracking, having a real-time control of what's happening in your supply chain. It doesn't matter where your suppliers are or where your operations are. Understanding the unforeseen risk, even climate-related catastrophes that may happen at one point, even geopolitical risks in one particular point of time are critical for you to do good and do well for sure on business. I think relying as well on an external party gives a lot more credibility to your program, right? Having an impartial organization that is able to tell you the truth and tell you the improvement plans without not having necessarily any type of interest in telling you so. It's absolutely important. And I'd say as well, the third point is all companies, when assessing to buy from an external company, are doing the make it versus buy it exercise. And in my experience, what I've seen is companies that eventually kind of develop their own internal programs are not able to scale it, are not able to actually focus on the full sustainability strategy just because it is so time consuming to implement an internal program for sustainability reporting, for the assessment of suppliers, for deforestation, carbon accounting, for whatever. It is very time consuming. Most of the time what we're seeing is the classic spreadsheet going on and is not able to drive change, not able to provide the improvement plans that we need, and people cannot really focus on what is strategic because they are focusing more on the tactical or even administrative side of things of sustainability.
100%, and again, a message that we try to stress, and it's great to hear it from a third party, right? How that make versus build dilemma is actually pretty clear where the benefit lies and the reasons behind that, and most importantly for everyone out there to know, Excel spreadsheets do not scale and should not be a core part of your sustainability reporting, right? So we need to evolve. There are tools out there that can help you. There are initiatives like Gravity. There are solutions like Finboots that can help organizations prepare and evolve to basically the next era of supply chain management and sustainability. With that, Giulia, I wanna thank you, of course, for such insightful comments. It's been a pleasure to have you in this Green Supply Chain Talk. Any final comments from your side, and particularly if people want to reach out, how can they do so?
Absolutely, thank you. Well, I'd say overall, I'm coming from London, and one of the major topics of the moment was omnibus, and I think we have now even the possibility to focus on what is strategic in terms of sustainability, not necessarily because we may have at one point of time any reporting duty, but actually focusing as well on the basis of our sustainability strategy and roadmap. I'd say it's important for companies to, again, focus on the value that sustainability will bring and not wait for the change to swift the manner in which we're making business, but actually advance, right, these changes so we can drive value in our business. Happy to reach out. Well, happy to be reached out by LinkedIn or email for sure.
Excellent. No, thank you very much, and that's absolutely right. Like, I mean, we we shouldn't wait for the regulator to make up their minds, particularly because as we've seen with the omnibus, even when they make up their mind, they may change things again. So we got to make sure that we act. And again, there are financial incentives that drive us towards that. So that's a clear case, let's say, made there for sustainability. Thank you again, Giulia.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for watching this Green Supply Chain Talk. Remember to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay tuned for new content. See you next time.